videoing, so for a change we'll video the shur. We're in the second book of the 5 books of the Kuzari page, Pei Hey, the great edition of Evan Shushan, Hutzat Dvir, Evan Shmuel Slicha. And we're up to a new subject in paragraph Samech Zayin and Samech Het, which is 67 and 68. If we briefly review what we've been studying, then we'll see the big picture in a better way. The king of Kuzari is astounded, basically, by the depth and the extent of the scholarliness of Torah. When we learn that the Torah relates to sciences and arts and music and so on and so forth, and that the peak or the height of scholarliness, when we had the high court called the Sanhedrin, they had to know 70 languages in order to be a member of the Sanhedrin. And this led to further study that our Torah encompasses astronomy, studying of the Jewish calendar based upon the lunar and the solar systems. And then we studied about the science of music and singing, where of all members of the nation of Israel, the Leviim are given that function, that responsibility in the holiest of all places, to play instruments and sing the song, the poetry, the praise of Hashem, written by King David. The Leviim in the Beit HaMikdash would accompany the public sacrifices. One, the Tamid of the morning, called the burnt offering of the morning, and the other, the Tamid of the afternoon. Yes, ever since the time of the Holy Temple, worldwide, the field of music has lost a lot of its quality. It's not in the hands of the most moral, most able people, but any even low-class peasant, a person who has no values or no morals, are writing and creating music and spreading the wrong values. This already happened 1,000 years ago in the time of Rabbi Yehuda Levi. The Rambam, Maimonides, agrees to this. In one of his letters, he also writes how that in spite of what happened once, in these generations, music is not something so noble, led by the most of the moral members of the world. Thereafter, the scholar of Israel led a leading question, which was not a question, but he answered himself. If we're talking about Torah and science and music and so on and so forth, what do you have to say about the wisdom of the wisest man on earth? Who is the wisest man on earth? Not you, not yet. Shlomo HaMelech, right? King Solomon, the Tanakh, testifies, the wisest of all men. His knowledge of science, of nature, aroused and stimulated the intellectual curiosity of neighbors, nations that are neighboring the Jewish people, immediately here in the Middle East, but also from far. Visits by leaders of nations in Africa and in Asia to the Yerushalayim to see what's going on in Yerushalayim. Wow, it aroused a lot of visitors. As some of you know, the Holy Temple was built already. And as it's stated in the Tanakh, the Holy Temple is not limited for the usage of the nation of Israel. Rather, as the Tanakh says, quote, Ki beiti veiti yikarei l'chol ha'amim. My house, God says, will be the house for all the nations to call upon. Universally, the Jewish people were on top of the world, reaching out to members of other nations by them coming to us. We're not converting. We're not going to try to convince others. But we reached a new peak in the world history, where the center of the world was Yerushalayim, and Shlomo Melech was the wisest of all men. And although it's not the subject here, some of you remember Shlomo Melech took wives from many different nations. Yes, they were Jewish. No, they were not born Jewish, but rather his court converted them. Everyone asks, why is he interested in so many wives, the daughter of Paro and the daughter of this king and the daughter of that king? Shlomo Melech had a plan, although it didn't succeed, is that Israel be the real center of the world and nations be attracted, magnetized to Yerushalayim by the fact that their children, their daughters are married to king. In the end, that plan didn't work, and it caused a fall. But just to remember, without media, electronic media that we have today, nations were understanding what Judaism is about, what Torah is about, through Shlomo Melech and his wisdom. Rabbi Yehuda Levi, with this we ended yesterday, explained in paragraph Samech Vav something very unique. Shlomo Melech had great wisdom in various sciences, technologies of that time as well. What did they do? Leaders of nations came to Yerushalayim and they exported to their countries these sciences. And now, in the Middle East and in Asia and maybe even Africa, these nations are benefiting from ideas and sciences that Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, had as the wisest man, that God dawned upon him this great talent and gift. A few hundred years pass, Israel's dominated by the Babylonian Empire. They are using these sciences. 200 years later, they're overtaken by the Persian Empire. And then they're overtaken a few hundred years later by first the Persian Empire, after the Babylonian, then the Greek Empire, and then Rome. He says, Rabbi Yehuda Levi, that all the great things in science that the world has benefited from really started out and originated in Yerushalayim and Shlomo Melech. No one bothered in these empires to say, well, we got this from the Jewish people. We received this. Thank you so much. We received this from Shlomo Melech. In other words, as time passed, those that copied, acquired, and used the sciences of the Jewish people never bothered to say, well, let's give credit where credit is due. He's not bringing it from a critical point of view, but saying, according to this understanding, a lot of the sciences originated by the Jewish people. Rav Kook writes, we ended with this, that in the time of the redemption, when the Jewish people are coming back, okay, a lot of those sciences will come back to the Jewish people, and the nation of Israel will refine them, sophisticate them, bring them to a level that's related to morality. We use the key example. Iran has so many great nuclear scientists, but they wanted to use their science talents for destruction, for killing, for murdering. We now start a new subject. What about the tongue of the Jewish people? Let's read it again. In Samech Zayin on the bottom. V'chiyesh la'ivrit ma'ala al pnei shara leshonot halo bein ele yesh shlemot v'ashirot mimena kasher anu roim zot beinenu. The last sentence of the above paragraph that I didn't read right now, Rabbi Yehuda Levi claims there's an advantage to the Hebrew language by the fact that it's the language itself, and also by the content inside the language. The king of Kuzari takes this not as an insult, but is curious to find out, really? How can Hebrew have an advantage over other languages? Now, remember, this question was brought up 1,000 years ago. If you had a standard to measure the Hebrew language 1,000 years ago, from 1 to 10, where 10 being the highest standard of Hebrew, what was Hebrew spoken 1,000 years ago? Huh? What was Hebrew 1,000 years ago? Huh? The Rambam even wrote his books in Arabic, translated to Hebrew. Rav Saadia Gaon probably also wrote his works in Arabic. Hebrew was not the spoken language of the Jewish people. When we were in Spain, we spoke Spanish. When we're in Germany, Ashkenaz, we spoke German. Okay? When we were in not yet. Maybe then, I'm not so sure. When we were in Morocco, we spoke Moroccan. In Tunisia, we spoke Tunisian. Therefore, how could Hebrew be what? Advantageous. We mentioned a fact somewhere of Shirky said that today in our modern day Hebrew we have about 70,000 words, as opposed to the English language, which has about 500,000 words. Right? And there were great scholars that wrote philosophical ideas, abstract ideas in other languages. And therefore he's wondering, how can Hebrew be advantageous? All this was a setup for now what the scholar of Israel will explain. You had a question?
It was more of a comment. I can answer that.
Make your comment.
I mean, isn't there a Gemara where Yosef is talking with Paro, and Yosef has to demonstrate that he's fit to be the...
There's a famous midrash that when Paro wants to harm Yosef, Yosef says, you better be quiet because I will go public that I know more languages than you know. And that he caused Paro to swear, not to reveal. When Yosef wanted to ask for having his father to be buried in the land of Israel, he put pressure on the king, you better have it done, because if not, I'm going to let the people know that you don't know as many languages as I know. Quote, Avi Hishbiani. My father caused me to swear to you, or something like that nature. So yes, Paro did not know Hebrew. Yosef knew Egyptian as well as many other languages. So what is the advantage of Hebrew over other languages? Amar HaChaver in Samichet, the bottom line. Kara ota ma shekarat nosea, nechlasha bechal sham, v'nidaldela ba'akevit ma'atam. A poetic answer. As you know, Rabbi Levi was a philosopher, scholar, and poet, as we know. Who is maintaining, who's carrying? You found your glasses? Mazal tov. You should bring a bottle of whiskey and drink a l'chaim. Where did you find it?
It was in the head in the lot of mattress. So I was talking with Yosef and it fell from my pocket.
You must be a happy person. So you know we're sharing your happiness. We're happy for you as well. Okay, what happened to the Hebrew language 1,000 years ago? It says what happened is what happened to the Jewish people that are carrying the language, that are maintaining the language. We're weakened, we're dispersed, we're scattered, we're exploited, we're running from the Crusaders and running away from anti-Semitism. Therefore, the typical Jewish situation 1,000 years ago is down. That's exactly what's happening to its tongue, its language. Okay? In other words, what is an indication of the language of a nation? The level that the nation is on. If they're independent, living in their own country, ruling and managing their own lives, then the language will be dynamic. The language will flourish. The language will grow. But when we are small, not living in our land, exploited, taken advantage of, hated, and so on and so forth, from one pogrom to another pogrom, then it has an effect, an impact on the language that we're speaking. That's as far as world influence. But let's get to the root of matters and see Hebrew in and of itself. What is it? Why is it? And then we'll understand why it's virtuous and special different than any other language on the face of earth. Ulam, however, mitzad atzma hi ha'atzila b'lshonot. Hebrew by itself, independently, is the most noble of all tongues. Why? Kayadua lanu mipi ha'masoret ulefi ha'hikesh hagioni. Two ways to explain why Hebrew is the most noble, unique, special language on the planet of Earth. Either because of the tradition that we're about to share with you, that's Masoret, what we've been receiving from the oral Torah, and secondly, from logic and rationale. That will explain why Hebrew is supreme above any other language. Number one, Al Pi HaMasoret, according to the oral tradition that we have, okay, Zot hi halashon asher banigla Elokai l'Adam. When God revealed himself and spoke to Adam HaRishon, he didn't speak to him in Spanish, nor in Hungarian. God spoke to Adam HaRishon, Ivrit, Hebrew. According to our tradition, okay, Bereshit bara Elokim, Vayomer Elokim el Adam. When God speaks to man, he spoke to him in Hebrew. What about his wife? Vel Chava. So too Chava. God prophesies to her. Uvad dibru hashnayim b'neihem. Okay? He spoke with both of them in Hebrew. Well, I was looking in the Chumash the other day, and I checked the book of Bereshit, and it didn't commentate and say Hashem spoke to Adam HaRishon and his wife, what's her name? Chava, be'ivrit. I searched. It didn't say that. So therefore, we have what's called a Masoret, a tradition. For 3,500 years, until Sinai, we have had an oral tradition explaining the written Torah, which is vague, which is short, not understandable. We're all handicapped. We have a crutch. We can't understand the Chumash unless we have the oral Torah. And therefore, at the end of Chumash Vayikra, chapter 29, if I don't make a mistake, Eile HaTorot V'Mitzvot V'Mishpatim. Torot, plural. Thank you. Torot, including Torah Shebichtav, the written Torah, and Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah. So, in Torah Sheba'al Peh, we're told that God spoke to Adam and Chava in Hebrew. Proof. Raya ladavar. Hashem, when we talk about nouns in the Torah, we're in line number 4 of page Pevav. Nouns. A noun, a name. Hashem Adam. Okay, come over here. Nigzar min Hashem Adama. V'Hashem Isha min Ish. V'Chava min Chai. V'Kayin min Kaniti. V'Shet min Shat. And also Noach min Yenachamenu. God, we believe, in order to explain this, I want to say the following. We believe Hashem is the essence of the world. He's the source of the world. He's the power of the world. He's the reason for the world that continues to exist. So a name, we believe in Hebrew, a name, you're called Shmuel, you're called Eitan, a name that is chosen represents a mission, represents an idea, represents a function, an essence. Why is Adam called Adam? Because God created him from Adamah. So by definition, a man is earthly. In this world, where we believe there's a connection between heaven and earth, between body and soul, between the spiritual and the material, there's an angelic world. An angelic world. Have you counted how many angels Hashem has in his storage room? Did you start? Well, I think you should start. The problem is you're never going to finish. as opposed to the angelic world, which is heavenly, which is spiritual. There's an earthly world. And for that, God created man. And he created him, therefore, from the Adamah. Of course, later it says, quote, Vayipach be'apav nishmat chayim. God blew through his nostrils a soul of life. And then man becomes a combination of two, body and soul, heaven and earth. So too the name Isha, since she was construed from a man, from the, what is it called? The rib cage. Okay, min ha'ish asher lukachti. She, Isha, was made from the ish that I took from. So in the name, the noun Isha, we have the noun ish. So the essence of a woman is from man. So too the examples Chava, the source of life, Kayin, Kana, I bought, and so on and so forth. In other words, if you check every and any language in the world in its natural tongue, there is nothing compared to this whatsoever. Nothing. That the noun, that the name expresses, manifests the source of where it came from. There's no other language. So who decided on these names? Hashem decided. Because he's the source of all essence, the source of all life. Okay? And therefore, every name has an importance. So events, after certain events, like Kaniti, I bought Kayin, these nouns are formed from these events that are happening. Okay? That shows that it's something dynamic, something new. An idea is being represented. Okay? Let's continue. Umilvad ze, in addition to this, yesh itanu edut, haTorah. The Torah itself provides testimony to prove this matter. Before we read the next phrase, how many generations from Adam to Noach? 10. How many languages are there in the world at the time of Noah? Don't answer the question. Why do you say one?
Before we built Babel.
Right? Before the generation called Dora Pilaga, the generation of division. The entire world that existed until then spoke but only one language. Has to be Ivrit. Right? And now let's ask ourselves, why is this language called Ivrit? You have an answer?
Yes. When you put the ayin away, what is the word, the rest of the word, when you put the
Brit.
Yes.
Okay.
Like Brit.
Maybe. It's a nice answer. Rabbi Yehuda Levi has a different answer based on Chazal. And it's Chazal that say this. Let's go to the next line. Itanu edut Torah. We have testimony. Al-Kach. B'kabbalat ish mipi ish, as the Torah is being transmitted from one generation to the other, ad Aver, until the generation of Aver, great-grandfather of Avram Avinu. Ki Ivrit hayta lishano shel Aver, v'al shmo nikra Ivrit, ki hu shamar alea gam bedora pelaga uvilbul al-lishonot. Avram shamar alea acharei Aver. Until the rebellion of Migdal Bavel, the Tower of Babylon, to go up against God. And the world was in almost perfect unity. People obliged and united together to go up against the oneness of God and show that we have power as well. And God said, well, this is the exact opposite of the mission of the world. I'm going to cause them a balagan. I'm going to disperse, confuse, scatter the peoples to the rest of the parts of the world. instead of being somewhere here in the Middle East, Mesopotamia, whatever. And they were scattered. And by definition, they created their own languages. Communication. They decided to call this a table, and that a ceiling, and that a chair, and so on and so forth, for argument's sake. But one, and one only, Aver, he maintained the Hebrew language. So when the world multiplied into many languages, there was one entity only that is carrying, speaking the language of God. And his name is Aver. And therefore the language that Aver speaks is now called Ivrit. Until then, I think we have no idea what the name of the language was. Because there was no need to call it a name. Why not? It's the only language that was being spoken. It's very interesting. The only language being spoken. Now, let's go back to something some of us have learned over the course of our learning of this fantastic book called Rabbi Levi's Kuzari. In book number 1, he explains to us that when we read this boring part of the Torah at the end of the book of Bereshit, Parshat Bereshit, as well as when we read that boring part of the Torah at the end of Parshat Noah, when we're told the lineage from generation 1 to generation 10, and from generation 11 then to generation 20, and we're told about one and one only name in each generation, even though he had brothers and sisters. Their names are not recorded. Nachon, it's not a history book, and it's not a book of chronicles. And we asked the famous question, well, why was it stated that way? That Adam gave birth to Shet, and Shet Arpachshad, and all these names, and Noach to Shem, and so on and so forth. What do we have to know about this? Answer. What's the name of the parents of Adam Arishon? Yeah, Adam Arishon. What's his parents' name? Okay, just trying to catch you. Okay? We're told, we know that first man was created by God. If he was created by God, he has something divine inside him. It's a divine creation. He's carrying what Rabbi Levi explains based upon earlier writers, of course, even in the Torah, Vitem li sgula mikol amim, shall be a treasured nation for all the nations. Adam Arishon is carrying something genetic, divine. It's called this divine treasure. God brings it down to Hevel, but Hevel is killed by Cain. It's then carried down to one of Hevel's child called Shet. And from Shet to one person only. What I was humorously saying, the boring part of the Torah, we can't be without it, of course. Each and every pasuk is divine. If that pasuk is missing, the Sefer Torah is invalid. But the lineage from 1 to 10, generation 1 to 10, and then again from 11 to 20, who is being recorded? The divine entities. One person only, is carrying that divine entity, that's Gula Elokit, this divine treasure. It's not based upon if he's helping the little lady cross the street with the groceries and he's doing kindness or not doing kindness. Aver was carrying this divine trait, very strong, and therefore will be the great-grandfather of later the appearance of an Avram Avinu, even though somewhere in between, Terach believed in polytheism and many gods and many powers, and was a wholesaler for idolatry or so on and so forth. And Avram Avinu grew up not in Machon Meir. Avram Avinu grew up in his father's house with so much idolatry. So I wanted to, Derech Hagav, by the way, to remind ourselves that Aver is carrying this divine trait, and the language is issued a name in his honor. because he's maintaining to speak the divine language. Okay? Al Kain, therefore it's called Ivrit, because he maintained it, and of course Avram preserved it. Let's continue. Omnam, indeed, Be'ur Kazdim, in the city, the town called Ur Kazdim. Okay? You can take this. In Ur Kazdim, Diber Avraham Aramit. Let me just get on the phone. Avram Avinu, how are you today? Yes. I would like to know, why aren't you speaking in Hebrew? You're the first of all, What? Did you hear what he said?
No.
He said everyone around him is speaking Aramit. Why? Because he's in the country called what? That's the city. He's in the country called. He's speaking Aramit. Aram. We have two countries called Aram. The one closest to us that we're almost in full control of in Syria, called Aram Damascus in the Tanakh. And we have another one further northeast called Aram Naharayim. Na'alayim, Shinayim, Einayim. The ending, the suffix of that word denotes two. Aram Naharayim. Two major rivers there in Mesopotamia. One called the Tigris and the other called Euphrates in Hebrew. Prat, and Chidekel. Where is it mentioned? Reshit, right? What came out of Eden, the rivers that came out of Eden. So, Avram Avinu, the forerunner of the nation of God, doesn't speak Hebrew yet. Or maybe he does, but in where he's growing up, he's speaking Aramit. And Aramit is the language that the Kazdim, Ur Kazdim, right? Later we hear about Babylon and the Kazdim as if the same entity. Okay? He is speaking Aramit. Ki Aramit הייתה שפת הכזדים. אולם, however, העברית הייתה לו לשון מיוחדת במעלה. לשון, oh, you hear that? Avram Avinu has a grandfather, great-grandfather called Aver. Aver continued the Hebrew language. But during that next 2 or 3 generations, when we're infiltrated, filled up with others that are not speaking that, then your tongue changes. So Avram Avinu knew Hebrew because he received it in a tradition from his great-grandfather, Aver. But the spoken language in Ur Kazdim is the Kazdim language, which is Aram language. Okay? But for Avram Avinu, Ivrit was a special language, a special tongue. Lashon HaKodesh, a nickname we're giving Ivrit. It's the holy tongue. Can you please tell me why it's called the Lashon HaKodesh? Obvious answer according to what we just read here. Why? Hashem spoke to Adam HaRishon in Ivrit, in Lashon HaKodesh. V'aramit Lashon Chol. Aramit remains a secular, non-holy language. Okay? In other words, when you have to manage your everyday life in Ur Kazdim, taking care of water, sewage, electricity of those days, all manners of farming and agriculture, the non-holy tongue was used. That was Aram. However, if I just ask you, when Avram Avinu is prophesied by God, where? In Ur Kazdim, travel to Haran, and God says, Lech Lecha. This gentleman is like Avram Avinu. You heard the call of God that tells you, Lech Lecha. Mr. Moshe Felix is joining Mechon Meir. He just flew in. How are your wings doing? Just flew in, a lot of strength. And God spoke to Avram Avinu in Hebrew, not in Aramit. God knows any tongue, of course, but he spoke to him in Kodesh because Avram Avinu is now beginning his holy journey. And the first and foremost thing that God says for Avraham Avinu is not to eat kosher, is not to put on tefillin, is not to do chesed, but get going. Get to the land of God, the land that I'm going to show you. You're going to be a forerunner of the nation of godliness. I'm going to make you into a great nation. I'm going to give you affluence. I'm going to heighten your name. Everyone's going to hear about you. Everyone's going to know about you. What did this little country do yesterday? We sent out 15, 20 planes, 1,800 kilometers distance to bomb the biggest murderers in the world. How was Israel doing this all the time? Every other week there's a new surprise of things that we're able to do. We're known in the world. Okay? Ach Yishmael beno nasat Aramit el Eretz Arav. Rabbi Yehuda Levi holds that the son of Avraham Avinu, who departed from Avraham Avinu and went to the Arabian countries, he took the other language, Aramit, and he spoke there. A result. V'chach nasu shalosh aleshonot ha'ela. We now have perhaps something similar to 3 cradles of civilization, 3 major tongues. Ha'aramit, Ha'aravit, which was established by Yishmael in those countries, apparently, okay, and Ivrit. I'm just stopping for 1 second. No, I want to read the next phrase. Domot zolazo. There is similarity in between the 3 languages, Aramit, Aravit, and Ivrit. Who was one of the great Rishonim that often explained matters of grammar and language matters? Which great Rishon did it? Who? Rashi. But even more than him, Ibn Ezra. Ibn Ezra in Spain, he holds that the 3 languages are basically like one language with some nuances and differences and some suffixes and prefixes that are different and so on and so forth. In other words, he goes even further than Rabbi Yehuda Levi. Rabbi Yehuda Levi says we have 3 different languages. In summary, we've explained now, according to Misoret, according to tradition, there's a ma'alah, there's a supremacy, there's a virtue in the Hebrew language, because Ivrit was the divine language that God prophesied Adam HaRishon. And every noun, perhaps in the original Hebrew language, has an essence, has a function, has an expression of significance. And therefore, without a doubt, all the other languages which are man-made, that started in Dora Pilaga, the generation of division, is not on the same level. We're not here to look down, to frown, or be critical of other languages. Please don't misunderstand that. We are here to understand the greatness of our language, of our nation, of our Torah. And everything related to this nation is not something which is parva, which is, just regular middle matter. Here, everything related to the Jewish people is greatness. It's language, it's way of life, it's divine values. Because we're related to a great nation. We're related to a great God. Even our little sea on the western border, okay? I mean, you from Europe and America, you know what seas and oceans are like. What is its name? Yama Gadol. Give me a break, Yama Gadol. It's small compared to so many seas and oceans and so on. So why is it called Yama Gadol? Rabbi Yehuda Levi explained it in the Sefer here. Because anything related to this country, this land, is Gadol. Not in quantity, but in quality, in spirituality. We'll continue with this point, B'ezrat Hashem, in our next shiur. Shalom. Okay, we'll learn some Shmirat Shabbat Kehilchata.